Check. 1, 2, 3.
The Debrief. This is the Debrief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's arts
and entertainment scene.
This is the Debrief.
Hello and welcome to the Debrief. I'm your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler.
And I'm Becky Scarcello.
And we have talked about storytelling a lot.
We have.
On this podcast.
Amazing.
It's an art form that I think not a lot of people necessarily know about or realize that there are these big events around. But there are. You have the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers here. You've got Shannon Kaysen, who just started his event down in Wyandotte.
Yeah.
But really, I think the storytelling event that all across the country made this huge was the Moth.
Right.
And we have a very special guest here today. He is the host of The Moth here in Detroit. He's also a sound designer for Audible Originals. Audible is the audiobook company. I'm a member.
Me too. We've talked about it all the time.
Yeah, please welcome Alex Trajano.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So let's start with these Moth events, because I've been to them. I've been to them both in Ann Arbor and here in Detroit. You do them over at the Marble Bar. For somebody who's never been, what happens?
So what happens at the Moth is we announce a theme every month, and then people gather at the Marble Bar the first Thursday of every month. And we get 3 teams of judges, and people put their name in a hat, and we pick 10 storytellers at random, and they each have to tell a story that's within 5 minutes with no scripts and no notes. And they will be judged on their abilities to tell a coherent story and keep it within the time limits. And then the judges give their scores, and somebody wins at the end of the night.
And this event is packed. I mean, there's a line out the door.
Well, the sellouts. I mean, the tickets go on sale. Boom, they're gone. It's awesome. I think it's such like a thing that harkens back to history. I mean, before we had any kind of media, it was storytelling. People told each other stories. So I think that's great that we're celebrating that, and people are so interested in it.
It is. It's huge.
The winners, what happens to them?
Nothing really. They get 1,000 cool points, I always say at the show. No, but,
bragging rights.
Yeah, but what we do at the end of a season, we take 10 of the winners, and then we have what's called a Grand Slam. And we do that normally at the Gem Theater. We've been doing it now there for, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 times now. But yeah, so they all do a battle royale, the 10 of them, and it's really super fun because those are like the best of the year.
So are there guys who, like, this is what they do? They are storytellers, and they...
Absolutely, yeah. There's guys that, I mean, I'm not sure that they do it for their living, but they definitely have a passion for it, and they're the regulars. They're sort of the titans of the Moth community here in Detroit, and you'll see them at almost every event.
So who are some of those people here in the Detroit area? Who are the storytellers that you see over and over again?
Well, there's a guy, he's a lawyer. His name is Ted Olds. You'll see him a lot.
He lives in my neighborhood.
Yeah, he's a great guy, great storyteller, multiple winner. There's another gentleman called Maxie Jones, who's a super cool guy. He lives in Grosse Pointe, I think. And he's just there. He's not, an author, or he's not a, writer of any kind. I don't think he does that for his living, but he loves telling stories, and he's really good at it. And he shows up every month. That's
cool. Now, you kind of started the whole thing through WDET, right?
Yeah, it was in 2009 I started at WDET, and our boss at the time said that he wanted to bring this event from New York to Detroit. It's a storytelling event, and, would anybody be interested in taking it on? And I had only been there for 2 weeks, and I just kind of wanted to, show my worth. Yeah, so I raised my hand, and so I was off and running as a producer for that event, and we had to find a venue, and I met up with the people from New York, and they kind of showed me how to do it, and then they all came down for our inaugural event, our first event, and it was just, I couldn't believe how amazing that was, how fun it was.
So how does it work? Is it like franchises? All these different chapters you have in different cities?
Yeah, not really franchise. I just, there's a we call it Moth HQ. The headquarters is in New York. It's a nonprofit. And the Moth, like when Detroit got the Moth, I think we were the 3rd city in America to have it. It was in New York and LA. So they picked Detroit for the 3rd, which is kind of cool.
That's cool. Wow. That ended up itself, yeah.
And so now, I mean, there's one in almost every major city in the country, and they have some overseas. It's like, I don't even know how many, but it's a ton. I mean, you can see it all on their website, themoth.org, and you can see all the areas around the country that have them.
So how has it changed over the years in doing this?
It hasn't changed. I mean, the infrastructure had to change because they grew so fast. I mean, I know from producing the Detroit show, it was like, you pretty much knew everybody in the office almost, but now they have a lot more employees. There's a lot going on. So I think that's really all they had to do was kind of staff up to deal with it. But in terms of us on the ground here in Detroit, we've been doing the same show month after month.
It's a good model, obviously.
We're in our 10th season right now, and it's true. It's sold out every single time.
Yeah.
Every time I show up there, I don't care how cold it is outside. There's a line around the block, and it's just amazing. And like as sort of a cynical Detroiter, that cynical Detroiter party where things come here and they're great for a minute and then they just sort of disappear and die. Not even close. In fact, it's getting bigger. Like every show, I always ask, how many first timers are here?
All right.
And at least half of the people are first timers.
Wow.
That's
so
incredible.
that tells you something. I mean,
Absolutely.
people are just hearing about it and showing up. It's pretty great.
Are there certain stories that really have stuck with you through the years, like ones that really hit you?
There's been a few. Yeah, there's a woman. You guys know Satori Shakur?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course you do. If you do the storytelling thing here, she's a titan.
She was one of our first guests
Exactly.
on the podcast.
Well, I'm not taking credit for this, but she came out into the storytelling world at the Moth.
Oh.
And I have the distinct honor of saying that I was there and saw that happen. It was like an explosion in the city. She was such a force of nature. She's incredible. So her story was, I think, the thing that I remember the most over the years, because she was she like destroyed the room. People were like, jaws were on the ground. They were laughing. They just couldn't believe what they witnessed. And she became this, really popular storyteller.
Yeah, she now runs the Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers that they do over the Charles Wright.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just special, too, because especially in an age when, you can see so many things over and over on YouTube or whatever, and to see something live like that, whether it be a concert or, a favorite author giving a reading or something, to have that kind of live, that can never happen again. Her in that room with that audience, like that's really...
Oh, yeah. It's just like, somebody who probably does it all the time. It's a performance. It doesn't matter if it's music or poetry or live storytelling. It is a connection with the crowd.
Yeah.
And it's very powerful. And I think the storytelling thing, culturally, like it goes back to caveman times, or like think about when you were a kid, before all the electronic gizmos were out. Like people would sit around at dinner and tell stories.
Yeah, or camping.
Or at a campfire.
Yeah,
I mean, and there is a really communal significance and experience to that people are drawn to.
After watching all these stories, are there things that make for a good story? Like, what are the ingredients that you found for a good story?
I think in terms of the Moth, I'll just say it in with the perspective of the Moth shows, I think what people really respond to the most is the realness of the storyteller. I mean, and I know that sounds like anything, but I think the people who have really gotten over and really were like had a great time and a lot of response from the crowd were the people who were kind of nervous when they came up there. They didn't seem prepared, and the more they got into their story, they sort of like lost themselves in it and became like in the moment, so to speak. And people really react to that. They can feel that. And then, so by the end of their story, they're a little bit more confident. They got a couple, like the crowd sort of behind them, and they've laughed at a couple of moments. And then when they're done, people go crazy. I think those are the ingredients. I think and I will say that I think people at the Moth kind of spot you if you're sort of workshopping material. And there's something
inauthentic.
I think they can feel that, and at this point, I've been doing the show since 2009. I've seen hundreds of storytellers at this point, and I can feel that too. When someone's up there, and it's not that that's not cool, like their gig or whatever they're working on isn't cool, but for the Moth, I think people can spot that a mile away.
And when you say workshop, you mean like stand-up comics are coming?
100%.
Or somebody from Toastmasters?
100%. Yeah, stand-up comedians, I know for a fact have been there. People have told me, oh, that guy's a comedian, and they're great.
Right.
And the crowd like laughs at them, but it's not like they're not really telling a story. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like they got their workshopping material, or that's material they've had or whatever. And I think so that sort of honesty of like being nervous and sort of stumbling on your words a few times and pausing and staring up at the ceiling to find your next sentence, and then kind of bringing it all together with a lot of heart. I mean, those are the those are the stories that get over the most.
That's really encouraging too, to know that the room kind of has your back, and it's very kind and human,
honestly,
and
No, for real. Like I can't tell you how many times somebody told me, like, I can't tell a story, I'm too scared. And then at the end of the night, they're like, I'm coming back next week, and they tell a story. Because they see, like, the room is so loving too, and it's like a really cool listening environment, and it's just such a loving place. Like, you will nothing bad is going to happen to you.
That's nice.
You know what I mean? It's really cool. It's really cool to see these people become more comfortable.
You've got to try it. I've done it. I've tried it. I put my name in the hat. I got up on stage.
You've never done it?
No, I've seen it, but I've never put my name. Yeah.
Listen, I know a guy. Just show up there.
Got my
Where do the judges come from?
They're just people in the crowd. Like, they're
really?
volunteers. Yeah.
Oh,
We ask at the beginning of the shows, we find anybody want to host.
Now that I'd like to do. I'd like to be the judgy one.
Yeah. That's what I meant to say. Anybody want to judge?
Yeah.
I think people know that now, because people will show up and go, we want to judge, like, before we even get started. Like, that's part of the fun too. People love judging. Yeah, it is fun. Yeah.
There's also the Moth Radio Hour. What's the relationship between that and the live shows that happen all over the country?
Well, it started as the radio hour, and that's how they source their materials, by recording all these slams. We call them story slams. So the relationship is that's sort of their flagship, piece of content that they put out, is their Moth Radio Hour. So all of us who do the story slams around the country, every show gets recorded, and the producers sort of flag some of the more interesting ones. They're like, wow, that was amazing, and then those go into consideration to be in the Moth Radio Hour.
Yeah,
so have you had ones that you flagged over the years that wound up on the radio?
Yeah.
What was it about them that you were like, oh?
Well, it was early on. We haven't been on the Detroit shows have not been on the Moth Radio Hour for a while, but it was just a really heartfelt story from a guy who was lovelorn and kind of a broken heart story, and it was a really sweet ending. And he his story got featured on the Moth Radio Hour.
Oh, that's cool.
And I wish more did, honestly. I feel like we swear a lot in Detroit.
Oh, sure.
You think? Yeah. I'm going to guess it.
Well,
That's
I know.
True.
I know we do in the stories. And
then
that sort of
doesn't get in.
Do they not bleep, or they don't like to?
They don't. Well, it just depends. Like, I've heard bleeping, and then but I don't know.
There's probably a limit to the bleeps. Like, 10 or more. No, it's too much. Yeah.
I don't know. We could have been on for all I know at this point. I just don't remember. It's been a while since I've checked. But
outside of just what you do with the Moth, have you seen the art form of storytelling change or grow in response to what's been happening with the Moth?
I think storytelling has definitely grown because of the Moth, but also because of the rise of podcasting. Like, podcast in general, like storytelling, narrative, long-form podcasts. I feel like those sort of created this thing. I mean, a lot of people are getting into it and wanting to make and tell stories. Like you mentioned Satori, she went on to start her own, storytelling events. There's other people in town too, like Shannon Kaysen. He's got an event, and and there's like this the Smitten Mitten Collective, which is a bunch of audio makers who have regular events, and it is. I feel like it definitely has grown.
Exploded, yeah. Now, you were involved in the first WDET podcast, correct, when you worked there?
Yeah. It was called The Beginning of the End, and I produced it and hosted it, and it was really fun. We got a season and a couple of episodes out of it, and it was great. It was such a learning experience and super fun. Yeah.
That's where you and I first met, was at the Podcast Movement Conference that happens every year and has grown quite a bit. I mean, tell us about some of your work over the years at WDET.
Yeah.
Well, I came to WDET as an audio engineer, and so I was recording bands and doing, the audio kind of things, like working on helping people mix their pieces and that kind of thing. And then after a while, I started sort of showing up on the air to do like fundraising spots and things like that. And
you've got the voice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good voice.
and I did some of their like little commercials that they have on and stuff. And then I started making these little funny things. Like speaking of the Moth, like, so I made those commercials for the Moth back when it started, promoting the event, and I made little like 15-second skits out of them, and just being goofy and having characters and all this stuff. But I would pull in people from the station that people knew around Detroit from being on WDET, so they were part of the skit, and it just was really fun. And then I started just doing a lot of other, like during the fundraiser, I would make these songs, these parody songs about asking for money, and these really kind of trying to be really funny and change the sound of how fun, like public radio fundraisers are.
Oh, right.
I tried to make it really fun and kind of humorous, and then be serious and epic when we had to, but really, So I tried to do all of that kind of thing, and then I started showing up on air more, and then I started doing some like arts and culture pieces, like doing, like NPR style, little features on like the local jazz community or some music thing or whatever. And I got to interview people. And so with the Moth and interviewing people and making these pieces and being surrounded by all these smart journalists, I really started to love the idea of audio storytelling. And that's what made me want to make that podcast.
That makes sense.
Really cool. It all kind of leads to the next thing, because your first love was music, right?
Yes.
So you started out as a musician.
Yes.
And tell us about your childhood band.
I was in a childhood band with my sister and my 2 cousins. So it was like 4 little Asian kids from Troy, Michigan, playing cover tunes, like 80s cover tunes.
Nice.
And we played, we did weddings and stuff like that. We even got on this, like, there was a show back in the day called Kelly and Company. Like,
oh, yeah.
Totally dating myself right now.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
They had like a Detroit talent show, and we went and did that show, and we auditioned. Like, there was, 1,000 people outside in the parking lot, and we went and auditioned, and we got in. So like we were in the top 10, and we were on the show.
Nice.
And so like all of our schools shut down for the day, and they rolled out the TV carts, and everybody watched. It was super great.
That's awesome. And then you went on to help record for musicians, right?
Yeah. I got into recording in high school more like with a cassette 4-track recorder.
Oh, yeah. Also dating yourself.
Yes.
But me too. I remember it.
I skipped a lot of school in those days because we'd go back to one of our houses and record, and then we learned how to record stuff, and it was just so super fun. And then, then I went to music school at Wayne State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you even started a studio, right?
Then I started a studio called Thriller Park, and I got to record so many great local bands and some non-local bands. I got to record the Stooges with Iggy. That was amazing.
Wow.
That'd be good.
Yeah. I had this really old recording machine. It was a 2-inch 16-track, for those of you who remember 2-inch tape, but it only had 16 tracks on it, which meant they were fatter and bigger sounding tracks because there's more anyways, whatever. Not to get all technical.
Like sound nerdy stuff. Yeah.
Anyway, so I got recommended to do that recording, and because the Stooges were all like in town, like Iggy was doing an art show. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so they brought everybody in, and it was like a dream. It was like a dream I had. It was like the biggest, coolest thing I ever did in a recording studio was recording the Stooges. It was great.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Now, are you still doing a lot of recording work?
No, actually, no, I'm not anymore. Like I've just kind of transitioned into this sound designer. Mm-hmm. So I'm not doing a lot of recording per se like I used to. When I was at DET, I recorded all the in-studio performances, and I did that for many years. So no, now I'm really just sound designing.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
What's a sound designer?
Yeah, so the sound designer is the person who takes all the elements of audio that you'd see in, let's say, a film. Mm-hmm. So there'd be dialogue, and there'd be music, the score, and there'd be sound effects. And we just do the mix for that.
Right.
But in the audio-only space, it's become this thing, a sound designer who sort of creates the sonic atmosphere of what the listener is listening to. Mm-hmm. So
in some ways, that's a lot harder because you don't have any visuals to kind of go with it.
Yeah, but it's also super fun because it's a lot like, I don't know. I don't paint, but it's kind of like painting, I guess.
Creative, yeah.
Yeah, so I work with either composers, or I do the music, and I get the dialogue and the script, and then we put this show together, and put all the elements in there, and you work with transitions, and you work with space, and different things to kind of create impactful moments in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing narrative fiction? Are you doing like storytelling journalism? What type of stuff?
Both. All of that stuff. And I actually am now working on some scripted stuff, which is something I'm excited about. This is through Audible. We're doing like these audio only theater pieces. And it's more like scripted drama, basically. So that's something I've wanted to get into more of. And so I'm working on.
So I was out at CES in Las Vegas like last week or the week before, and there was a panel on podcasting, and there was a prediction made by one of the panelists who said, I think that in the coming years, you're going to see a quarter of all Hollywood movies and television shows be made and sourced from podcasts. That's where they're going to start as kind of the testing ground, and that they're eventually going to be turned
built into
like a TV show or a film.
Yeah.
There is one now out called Homecoming.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We're watching that. My husband and I are watching that right now.
That was a podcast first.
Oh, yes. I did read that.
With
Julia
Lore
Roberts.
and, even Two Dope Queens and Pod Save America.
There'll be a debrief movie.
There'll be a debrief
any
movie.
minute now.
Who's going to play you?
Me.
Oh.
Who's going to play you?
Brad Pitt.
All right.
Tom Cruise, the right height.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, we should back up and say now you're working for Audible Originals.
Yep.
Yeah, so tell us what that's all about.
Audible Originals is making just tons and tons of content, whether it's commissioning authors to write for them or like what we're doing with our scripted theater pieces. So we've done everything from long-form documentaries to podcast style, narrative journalism type pieces.
With like a series and different episodes,
We call them more chapters,
chapters,
because they flow more like books. We've done all those things.
Yeah. So, and it's owned by Amazon, which has Amazon Originals. This is fascinating in the industry too. Just how Netflix they're creating their own content, and it's doing amazing.
Just the audio entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And we're just getting into smart speakers, and we're just getting into the point where you can call this stuff up in your car dashboard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to explode even more.
What do they call it? Appointment listening, or that on-demand thing.
On demand.
Like you listen to when you want to listen to it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what I want in all of my media. It's just I want to pick and choose
Of
what I want to
course.
see when I want to see it. Right?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You have no tolerance anymore for commercials or that one song you don't like on the album or whatever.
It's gone.
All right, Alex, you ready to play a little game?
Yes.
All
I
right.
think so.
So ominous. I love watching
I've never said this before. I'm suddenly embarrassed now that we're playing that for a sound designer.
I know. It's so lame.
It was very effective. I'm very, very scared right now.
We're trying to set the mood.
If that were our intent, it would make sense.
Oh, I'm sorry. You wanted me to be happy?
No, that's what everybody thinks. They're like,
that was my chipper music.
No, I'm terrified.
Here's how this works. We're going to ask you for a series of rapid-fire recommendations. Just tell us the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Where's your favorite place in the Detroit area for cocktails?
Ooh, my favorite place in Detroit for cocktails. Right now, I'm liking Lost River.
Oh, the Tiki. Yeah, on the east side.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Nice. What's your favorite place to see a concert in the city?
Oh, I'm going to say my ears have loved the Fox Theater the most when I've seen.
Is that how you judge it? I mean, you listening for the acoustics? I mean,
I do. Yeah, I get so upset if it sounds crappy somewhere. I leave. I can't do it.
Oh,
I got to. It's got to sound good.
Yeah,
So
it's perfect.
What rooms have the best acoustics around the city?
Otis Supply is really good.
Yeah.
The guy, Loving Touch has a good setup going. That sounds great in there.
We just saw a band there the other day.
And the place that blew me away recently was Willis Show Bar.
Very,
Yeah, it's really small. It's like I played on that stage as a drummer recently.
Oh.
And you have to play really quiet and stuff, but the guy knows his room there really well. Let me tell you, so the other band was playing while I was like hanging out in the bar area, and I turned and said to my buddy, "What's the CD they're playing?" And I turned around and it was the band.
That's how good the sound was.
It was, it sounds amazing.
Was it the Heavy Petters, their house band that was playing?
I
think is so hilarious.
No, but I love that name. No, I don't know who it was. I forgot now.
Oh, that's good to know. You're like someone with the best taste buds, that can distinguish all the types of, but your ears are perfect.
But I'm always that person like, oh, it sounds weird. Oh, this restaurant's killing me with the sound.
Yeah. Restaurants are the worst.
Yeah.
If you could have lunch with any Detroiter, dead or alive,
oh boy,
who would it be and why?
Who would it be and why? I don't know. The first thing that comes to my mind is Coleman Young. I don't know why. I was thinking that right now.
Provocative.
And I want to know what was going on at that time when he was in charge. I want his truth. I want the truth.
You might not be able to handle the truth.
I know I won't be able to handle the truth.
What's your favorite Detroit neighborhood?
I like, I love Woodbridge.
Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
used to live there, and I loved it.
What did you like about it?
I liked the trees, and I liked the sense of community that was in there. Everybody was cool and
looked out for each
kinda
other.
Looked out, it was nice.
Do you have a favorite outdoor festival?
Yes, and it's the jazz festival that happens in the fall.
Ooh.
Yeah, Labor Day weekend.
I don't know what it's called now. North American International Jazz Festival. That one.
Yeah,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yep.
It's huge. Yeah. Awesome.
Normally we'll ask for a favorite song by a Detroit artist, but I want to ask, what do you think is the most sonically interesting song by a Detroit artist?
Sonically interesting song by a Detroit artist?
Something where you're just like, ooh, that's cool.
I'm going to say P-Funk.
Oh, yeah.
One of those records has such a beautiful sound to me, and they always had weird, crazy instruments going on.
Yeah, a lot of funky sounds.
Yeah, but there's others. There's so many people. I can't think of them all right now. Frank Paul comes to mind, if you guys know that guy.
Yeah.
All right. There it is. You passed.
Yes, flying colors.
Nice job. Alex Trajano hosts The Moth. It happens every month over at Marble Bar. When's the next one?
Thursday. It's the first Thursday of every month.
February 7th.
And the theme is Love Hurts. It's my favorite topic of all time.
Okay.
You got your story, Becky? Becky married her high school sweetheart. She wasn't
not high school.
Oh,
No,
what
God.
was preschool?
No, he's living with 800 cats in Arizona.
Someone before him made you mad, though.
True. No, I married my college sweetheart. So.
Becky was always the dumper. She was never the dumpy.
I've never been dumped.
We found that out.
Maybe I could tell a story about that. No one would like that story. They'd be like, get off. Come on.
And the website where people can go to find out more information?
They can go to audible.com for some of my work with Audible. And for The Moth, you can go to themoth.org.
Perfect.
Easy. And get your tickets early because they sell out.
They do.
Always.
And it's a fantastic event. If you've never seen a storytelling event,
Gotta go.
Definitely go check it out. Well, Alex, thank you so much for stopping by. This was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Yes,
Yeah, that was
thank you.
fun. Thanks, guys.
I think we're gonna up our sound design a little bit.
I love it.
You've inspired
I feel
us.
pressure.
Don't
Yes.
change a thing.
All right, guys. Until next time, Detroit's moving.
Keep up.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.